Welcome back to the Lyme Podcast. My name is Aaron Alexander. This is a place that we bring together the world's leading experts on all things health and wellness to help you optimize your mind, body, and movement. Today's conversation was with my new friend, Dr. Drew Ramsey. He is a bad mofo. He is a medical doctor. He's the clinical professor of psychiatry at Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons and is in active clinical practice in New York City. Presently, he moved to Indiana and he's headed off to Jackson Hole, Wyoming to ride horses bareback. Is my vision of what he's going to do. He's also featured all over the place. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Huffington Post, NPR, BBC. He's got multiple books. He's got TED Talks. He's one of the primary pioneers in the conversation around food psychiatry. He is a bad mother trucker. And it was very fascinating discussion of the way that food impacts and informs our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, decision-making. We get into neuroparasitology, which is essentially the study of when one critter hacks the nervous system of another critter in order to impose their will upon them, typically for some form of reproduction or something of the sort. There's examples of this in nature with fungus, such as the cordyceps mushroom, which we discussed a little bit in this conversation. Toxoplasmosis is another example of it that we've discussed previously. The jewel wasp is another interesting example. So if you guys are curious about this phenomenon that happens in nature, look up any of those or just listen to this conversation. Our body is absolutely infested inside and out with a whole plethora of different bugs. And so my mind, of course, goes to what level of free will do we have? Who's running the show in this human organism? Is it the trillions of bugs that our bodies act as a little mini mobile hotel for? Is it maybe social media? Is it the food that we put into our face, the way it affects our blood sugar or hormone levels, our circadian rhythms? I don't know. In this conversation, I dig into the mind of someone that is far smarter than I probably ever will be, Dr. Drew Ramsey, and we discuss questions that are far-reaching, at times head-scratching, and it was recorded about, I think we started recording at like 9 p.m., 8:30 p.m. or something like that. We didn't finish up until after 10. So the beginning of it, I think we were both a little sleepy. In the end, I think 20 minutes in is when it gets really good. 25 minutes in or so inside the sauna here at my place in Santa Monica. And that's it. That's all. If you enjoyed this conversation, por favor, leave us reviews if you feel we deserve it. iTunes, Spotify, any place that feels good for you. That's a great way to support. Also, you could tell your friends, tell your grandma, tell your cousins, whatever feels good for you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Here we go. Back to the program with my dog, Dr. Drew Ramsey. We're good to go. And you've got a new book, good sir.
I do have a new book coming out.
Eat to Beat. I like the alliteration. Depression and anxiety. Nourish your ways to better mental health in 6 weeks. Don't you love the 6 week, the publisher, the demand that there's like, you have to do it? And yeah. I don't know if that, did you have before the book? Was there the 6 week or was that a formulation from that?
Well, 4 to 6 weeks is the general time it takes for antidepressants to work, at least pharmaceutical antidepressants that aren't ketamine or psilocybin. And I would say even for those medicines to take full effect and to really think about them in a therapeutic situation, you're talking 4 to 6 weeks. And so certainly there's the kind of adaptation to what we do clinically and how I think about food and brain change into a 6-week plan. But there is something to the 6 weeks. I mean, there's a reason I didn't want to do a 21-day plan or a 10-day plan. I think that 4 to 6 weeks, you can take small steps, but still get to the important changes that a lot of people, especially a lot of people struggling with mood and anxiety, need to make to improve their brain health and their mental health.
Is anxiety, depression, things of that sort, is that something that's coming from your own personal experience? Is that why you're passionate about it?
Well, for sure. I mean, it comes from my personal experience, and I think it comes from, even though I call it professional experience, it's very personal being a psychiatrist. And so that's really where I've lived the last 20 years of my professional life. Early in my career, I took care of patients with a lot of psychotic disorders and more what are called SMI, severe mental illnesses. Not really the best moniker for them, but even then, I mean, just taking care of a lot of patients with for depression and anxiety. That's really what my practice is kind of focused on. And then personally, I would say that probably, I mean, in between when I met you and then when I came over here, I went out to the ocean, which for me is in some ways a lot about anxiety and exposure therapy and kind of sitting with a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of active imagination, a lot of thoughts about sharks while I'm in the water. Maybe every surfer's like that, but a lot of just things that interrupt your breath and make you not a very good surfer and not a good headspace. And then depression, I think, it's funny. With this book, there have been more questions about that, and I think that also talks about where we are, that just people are talking about their mental health more, which is really wonderful. And so for sure, I mean, I started in psychotherapy when I was in medical school, second year of medical school. And it was just, I was struggling a little bit with my mood, with medical school in general, and just I don't know, I was a pretty, integrative kind of guy. I don't know. I liked natural stuff. I was really interested in diet. I was a vegetarian at that time. I was interested in acupuncture. And, it's being trained in a traditional medical model is really a test that doesn't have a lot to do with the facts at the end of the day. I mean, if you think about, as a psychiatrist, the number of facts I learned in medical school that I use in everyday practice, but it's not a ton. But it teaches you a stance, and it's really this trial by fire. But it's one of those things that every time they change the training, old doctors kind of, would say, shake their head. But there's something about being there all the time in the hospital, just being in all stages of illness in a somewhat fragile state. So that's why doctors burn out. That's why we have a lot of depression, suicide, addiction. I mean, all that stuff. And not just to physicians. Physicians get all the headlines, but that's all of healthcare. And particularly this year, we're recording in 2021, when I think about the amount of carnage and death and suffering that my colleagues have seen and endured. And in the midst of all this political discord, they're actually the ones going to work every day in the ER. It's just... it's staggering, actually, the amount, the burden and disability of depression and anxiety when it comes to what everyone's experiencing now, sort of quasi-para-pandemic, as I'm calling it. We're not really post-pandemic, but we see some light at the end of the tunnel.
I wonder how depression and anxiety and mental emotional states like that would affect the state of the healthcare model in Western medicine. I wonder how that affects the course of healthcare.
How does the fact that we don't take care of the mental health of healthcare providers affect our healthcare system?
Yeah, like the direction of the healthcare system.
Well, I think it's one of the reasons a lot of people are unsatisfied with the healthcare system. That the reason healthcare workers are depressed and anxious is they're often not appreciated. They spend a lot of time in the midst of a very inefficient electronic healthcare record that really hasn't, I'm sure it's benefited big data. It's really destroyed the patient-doctor relationship in a certain way. And, physicians spend a lot of time having to justify things, their decisions, in ways that is infuriating. Like the other day, I was prescribing some, generic medication like Prozac. It was like literally $10 for a 3-month supply. And I had to jump through about an hour of hoops for no apparent reason. It's like kind of when you get stuck on the interstate and you're in this horrible traffic jam. And there's something, if you never actually see what causes it, that just feels particularly a little cruel. I think sometimes being in healthcare is a little bit like that. The bottom line is anything that gets in between healer and patient, in my mind, begins to really dilute both the experience of the healthcare provider, but also the patient experience. I mean, it's why, in the end, I became a psychiatrist, is it seemed the only way left in modern medicine to actually get to know people, because it's the last place in medicine where we listen. This very privileged spot. Certainly, all of my colleagues in medicine do their best to listen. We all know that the best way to practice, the best way to have better outcomes, the best way to know your patients and feel satisfied is to listen more. It's just hasn't really been protected anywhere else in medicine other than in psychiatry.
And then that listening, having a safe place to be listened to, I wonder the value of that in a culture that is presently more isolated than ever. I mean, the pandemic stuff, loneliness and depression. I think the WHO called it the number one leading cause of disability worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And all that, I think, ultimately ties back to a lot of different things, nutrition obviously included, but a general sensation of feeling disconnected, feeling like maybe, no one cares, or why would they? So I'd imagine that's such a powerful part of medicine that I think it would be easy to overlook that part in the standard Western model.
I think so. I mean, I think that part of what we're struggling with in the Western model of medicine is that. Oh, sorry about that.
It's okay.
Someone's dinging me.
No, it's okay. Ding it up.
Oh boy.
What we got?
Sure it's not.
You got some action? Those your kids on there?
Those are my kids.
Oh, that was Max Lugavere.
I feel like such a cool LA guy. I'm here. You're like, I think probably one of the fittest people I've ever been around.
We're keeping that part in the podcast. That's for sure.
You're super fit. This is actually, if you ever, I don't come to LA very much, and yesterday I had the kind of poor country boy experience of LA where I went for sushi and I waited for a table and I waited forever. And, it's just sort of there by yourself feeling like, gosh, I don't know. And then tonight I'm at this like super cool spot. I'm going to see Max Lugavere, super cool guy. It's like, I feel like a cool, I've got
yeah, you're a cool guy now.
Black pants on.
Dr. Ramsey, you're a cool guy.
Here, let me show you a picture.
You're LA chic.
Let me show you a picture of my kids here. These, where are my little... there's a picture of my horse. That's Cinco.
Oh, right. You're an equestrian.
That's...
Mother flipping Drew Ramsey, the equestrian. Riding bareback.
I'm trying. I haven't tried
Jackson Hole.
I haven't tried bareback yet. That's my son Forrest and Cinco the horse.
That's good. So you get down in the nature. You're about the nature.
Yeah, we live on 120 plus acres of mainly forest and pasture and really, really rural Indiana.
Yeah.
And yeah, it really does something for you in terms of hanging out in the nature every day and being there in the kind of cycle of things. And
so with the nature, there's the Shinrin Yoku, which I'm sure you're well familiar with, the old nature bathing.
Forest bathing.
Japanese talk. And when you're in the nature, there's all the different, there's so many different layers to what's happening. There's the visual aesthetic aspect of it, which probably ties back to our ancestral memories, I would imagine. So you being outside in open savanna, that triggers something that tells you that you're safe.
I agree, and there's even data. There's this great hospital here.
The humans.
Those are my humans.
Whoa, your son's got steez.
Yeah,
that's what a vibe.
They're pretty cute. This is the first time in the pandemic I've been. The thing about having young kids is, sort of everything in your life takes you away from them, right? That it's sort of a strange thing being in your 40s and you kind of hit your stride professionally, and
right,
and then all of those things just take you away from your kids at some point in a way that is just really challenging. I haven't been away from them for the whole pandemic, and especially after I was traveling back and forth between New York, where I had my practice and was doing some of that digitally, maybe a third of it before the pandemic, and then spending half the week in really rural Indiana, and it was just... it was sort of a problem I didn't exactly know how to solve because it was working out okay. We were pretty nomadic and mobile as a family and got to go kind of traveling around to do a lot of spreading the brain food gospel, but also there was this sense of just like even being away from them for a couple nights, just not, I don't know, you just miss a lot.
What a great thing that you have that to miss.
Yeah, it's really, it is a very, very stabilizing thing for me. So I'm sort of asking about my mental health, and that's certainly for me been something that's been very, I would say like challenging in all the right ways, like, that hormesis idea, right? That just like really challenges, at least it's challenged me to kind of, you don't end up ever, I think, being the type of parent that you think you're going to be. And then it's a little startling, right? When you hear yourself as like, I don't know, being grumpy, or you hear yourself like scolding your children appropriately, but you're like, wow, I sound like that, like, dad thing.
Yeah.
It's right, but it's such and then they change so quickly. It's really this mix of emotions where just as you're totally like, living on your 18-month-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 5-year-old, whatever, it's like that is a very like it's a brief bit. It really teaches you the importance of mindfulness and being present in a way that nothing else has for me.
So the mindfulness, presence, nature, Shinrin, Yoku stuff, how big of a lever is the exposure to the bacteria that we'd naturally be exposed to when we're spending time out on a farm or out, near a dog that's bringing stuff in, and cultivating our microbiome, and how does that end up trickling in and out and up and down into affecting our thoughts, our feelings, our...
Well, I mean, really, that's the fun question that's getting answered these days. I mean, you can look at some of the data and some of the studies that have shown shifting bacteria in the gut lead to shifts in cognition over time, some improvements, some changes in mood and improvement in mood. There's a really interesting study that came out of Johns Hopkins showing that if you gave people who were hospitalized for mania, if you gave them treatment as usual and then gave them a probiotic versus gave them a placebo, the patients who had both a high inflammatory index and got the probiotic, they had a 90% decreased rehospitalization rate in 6 months. Again, it's like a lever and it gives a piece of evidence, like, does bacteria shift or modify the brain and brain behavior, emotion, cognition? And I think for sure the answer is yes. Then what does this have to do with kind of this natural lifestyle of being outside? I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways that, we're just talking about my kids, right? Boy, being with my kids out in nature, I mean, like, it's such a... for anybody who has pets or kids, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It's just such a different experience. You kind of get them get them out in the wild. And then in terms of the bacteria you pick up, and it's one of the reasons I actually moved my family to the farm. We were living in New York. My son was like looking like he might get an asthma diagnosis. And, like when you have like a young family in New York and your kid is like a little sound sensitive, there's a way it just feels like, I don't know, it's frightening. There's such a scrutiny of kids and of development there, and such a kind of competitiveness by nature in New York. And I think it's a part of getting out to the farm for us. We started doing it just in the summers, and then we moved out full time. It is about the bacteria. I mean, it's about, like, I don't know, the kids holding chickens. It's about, like, I don't know what this is, but probably, like, we stay in here too long, you're just gonna start smelling a little bit like horse shit, because I've been around horses so much. I was like smelling myself in the mask the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh. Every now and then it's just, we're constantly in a barn or handling an animal or eating food with dirt on it or eating food directly. A lot of times we'll go out, pick food directly from our garden, rinse it off a little bit, and that's it. And so, you can slice the evidence all kinds of different ways. You can look at farm kids and that they have lower rates of allergies. You can look at, that type of data. You can look at the microbiome diversity of people who are exposed or spend time on farms, and it tends to be more diverse. But, it's interesting to me how we try and kind of parse these things out and prove them in a scientific way, right? Where it's like somehow that informs and tells us what we feel. And I think as I've gotten more secure in my identity and maybe a little older, and it seemed to me one of the things that's happened to people in general is a kind of abdication of really a sense of our own experience. Like, I was thinking, I know exactly what I feel today. Like, I'm not a great surfer. Like, I didn't grow up in Hawaii like you. Like, I paddle out there, and it's exciting and terrifying and a little disappointing every time. but I know what I feel when I'm out there. I know what I felt today after the surfing when I'm on the edge of the ocean and I'm sitting there kind of overwhelmed in all of my senses and just really trying to, I don't know, settle down right there on the edge of the land. So I think people know what they feel on farms and in nature, and I think there's some reasons for that. There's also probably some of the questions of, like, how much do these bugs kind of influence us, control us? It's going to be a real interesting next 10 to 20 years as we sort out this interplay between microbiome, inflammatory systems, food, and dietary pattern. It's going to be good.
How much do the bugs control us? When you came in, I was watching a YouTube video about cordyceps mushrooms, and neuroparasitology is the term for the study of various different parasitic organisms in the nature, essentially hacking another critter's nervous system to do as they wish, to follow whatever their will is. Typically, it's to...
Yeah, it happens to us too. I mean, if you look at inflammatory factors and things, there's a whole theory related to psychotic disorders of different types of parasites causing those in some people, or being implicated in those, or maybe inflammatory reactions caused by certain types of parasites. So it's how much do they control us? I mean, I think Demi argues that it's a subtle effect. I mean, it's a profound effect and a subtle effect. So it's kind of hard to, in the sense that I can go and change my microbiome, and not a tremendous amount in the short term is going to change in my emotional mental health. However, for example, there are some experiments in animal models of autism, where they will grow mice in sterile environments, and they begin to have a lot of features like autism. So there is something about the interplay between our genes and the bacteria that is critically important. I think it's also, we do a bad job as humans in terms of timeline. So if I take a probiotic course now, I'm looking for change like tomorrow, right? The next day. And as a human, we're particularly bad at thinking and measuring long-term outcome. Like, the real question about that is, how do I feel 4 weeks from now or 6 weeks from now? And does it make a difference? I think the other part about the bugs that don't compel me is, I've spent a lot of time helping people change their lives, and we haven't changed their bacteria too much. I mean, certainly some of my patients, we radically change their diet, but I see a lot of patients who eat reasonably well.
Is this like measuring stool samples, or when you say not changing the bacteria, how are you?
Well, I think unless people have significant shifts in their dietary pattern, significant courses of antibiotics, if someone comes in, sees me, they're, eating a reasonably plant-forward omnivorous diet, occasional fermented foods, let's say. There's not a lot of bad stuff in there. Besides my general move of increasing fermented foods and plants, I don't think that I'm profoundly shifting those individuals' microbiome. I think that they probably come in with reasonable microbiomes. In terms of testing, I am not so convinced that testing does anything more than either says to you, you're doing a good job eating plants and bacteria, or you need to do a better job eating plants and bacteria. It's one of those tests that, like a lot of newfangled kind of tests and biomarkers that are getting thought about, they're really kind of on a frontier of where conventional medicine has certain notions about how testing should work, what it should cost, how it should be applied, and who should control the information. And that's really completely been upended over the past, I'm going to say like 8 years, 5 to 8 years. So I don't know what I think about it yet. I see patients get results in an unsupported way that I don't think is very helpful for them. And then I see people get results, and it's really empowering to them in a variety of ways, but it's probably not because the results are accurate. Like, if we think about, not that they're accurate, but that they're meaningful. Like, if we think about, let's say, running your 23andMe to understand your methylation pathways through something like Genetic Genie, and you look at all your SNPs in your methylation pathways. There's some way that we're going to try and extrapolate that, or people want to extrapolate that to like, wow, I have a lot of SNPs, and that might explain my depression or my anxiety. And we like those narratives, but it's not so clear that those narratives really are quote-unquote truth as we understand it in science yet. So
What do you think research in 10, 20 years down the line, when there inevitably will be some level of research on the impact of young people wearing masks or being exposed to people with masks, covering up facial features, which is a primary indication of expression, and someone's reading someone's state. And so to go through the world, say, primary developmental stage of your life, and to not be exposed to one, facial expressions. Two, also being exposed to people that are kind of, distance, obviously, a part of it, but also almost like afraid of each other.
Freaked out, I think is the word.
Yeah.
No, I experienced
but
that.
But not just, I think there's a difference between generally we're freaked out and we're freaked out of each other.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Because we're freaked out actually could be cohesive and could be to the development. We're freaked out could be the healthiest thing for a culture that's separate.
Brings us together.
If we're freaked out by the alien out there.
This is a particular type of freaked out because there's not accountability for behavior, in the sense that the people who sort of spread the virus or are, let's say, bad players in this, or, there's no accountability in a way of like who kind of does the spreading. Because symptoms and asymptomatic spread have been such a big part of this. I think to your question about kids, my general feeling on kids is kids are super resilient. And so I think, of course, there is an effect. I've even noticed it in my brain. Everyone, I think probably listening has had that experience where you're in a conversation and you're like, dang, it's like, where's the leave meeting button to like end this call?
Oh, yeah, I've had
And then
that.
you're like, oh, wait, I'm talking to a person in real life. Or that you're like the first person I'm hanging out with in 3D. You've had COVID. I've had the vaccine. It's the first time I've done this in like a year.
It's great.
And so it is. It's great.
Love
it's
it.
been really reassuring that this still happens. So I think there's going to be the re-entry as we get the population vaccinated. There's going to be the kind of bumps of re-entry. I think that fades kind of quickly. I've been kind of back out in the world for about a month now. Still wearing a mask, still trying to wash my hands a lot and be safe. But at the same time, I've been in a lot of different states. I've been in Wyoming. I've been in Florida. I've been here in California. And it's just been very interesting to see the different attitudes, the different things that get evoked in people around what this means. As a psychiatrist, I'm probably as interested in what happens internally for people and what it evokes in them and what that means about their psychology and their psyche that can help them understand themselves, probably a little bit more than the actual kind of like truth. I begin to think about your fantasies and associations of what happens to those children and what it means, right? And how it relates to kind of you, which is, that's definitely the psychiatrist in me.
Say more about that. So you're saying you're reading into the fact that my mind's going into that direction, like what that says about me as a person?
Yes, yeah. And also just as I think about things as a shrink in terms of thinking about how COVID in mask wearing affects us, allows us relief from a certain way. I think, feeling you have of wearing sunglasses that people can't see you,
Totally.
see your expressions. Well, now, between sunglasses, a hat, and a mask, it's like nobody sees anything about you. And so there's something that is deliciously private about that. There's something that's terrifying about that. Getting really good at reading people's eyes and somehow. Also, you're pointing to that we can only last so long like that we need facial expressions, we need smiles.
Well, unless you go to, Islamic religions, and women are wearing a hijab. What is a burqa?
I think
burqa's not.
I think a burqa is kind of. Well, I think the burqa is kind of the. I don't exactly know, but I think it refers to kind of the larger, the covering and the actual garb.
But cookie crumbs were.
But I don't know. It's it's actually really it's an interesting association. And I think about this because there are cultures certainly that cover their faces, and to think about
Even covering your chest, or covering your pants, or covering your cock. That's all just cultural decisions. That's not normal. That's normal based off of what we've been indoctrinated into.
That's true. I think out in nature, I'd still cover my cock and eyeballs a little bit, just because
it's like, a little coconut cup.
Extra, yeah. I got coconut.
For you, a large coconut cup. For me,
external genitalia. I just think it's like a little vulnerable. It's like I like the surfing. Like I like the wetsuit surfing a little bit more because I feel like it just gives me that little hug and a little layer of protection against.
And you're more
ocean.
buoyant, which adds that level of safety.
That's which way is up.
Yeah.
What I want to know what you think about nutritional psychiatry, which is this really new field. My first book kind of on the subject was 10 years ago. Now we have actual nutritional psychiatrists. There's clinical training you can get in terms of nutritional psychiatry. Actually we just offered the first course a couple of years ago for that. Yeah. But as you think about our collective mental health, how much do you, especially what you've seen with your clients, how much do you think food plays a role? Because I always think that that's kind of the, like everything right now in how we debate, there's this kind of, it feels like sometimes the food is medicine, nutritional psychiatry type talk
Yeah.
can kind of go into a very like anti-med, anti-traditional therapy, kind of people are struggling with their mental health because they don't eat well.
I mean, it's chicken and the egg. I think that the way that you eat, in large part, is indicative of your identity structure, who you believe yourself to be. And so if you are a person that maybe has like lower self-worth, for example, and this isn't 100% because I know a lot of people with seemingly really high self-worth.
Seemingly.
And high net worth. And
Seemingly is a great word there.
Right.
And you and I both know net worth rarely has much to do with self-worth.
Certainly. In fact, they can be reciprocally associated. But depending upon the nature of why that person was aggregating all of the material stuff, if they're trying to fill an insatiable void that's different than the person that's just really effective at playing the game. And so it's really hard to have any specific binary yes, no to I think anything. I think it's always, it really depends on so many different variables. But I feel like with the nutritional conversation, I think a lot of it, there's one side that is, well, who I believe myself to be, that's how I will reach out and, extend my hand to grab the fruit or the kale or the whatever at the grocery store or the Burger King or the Chick-fil-A or whatever it may be. And then there's also the reciprocal side of that of what goes into my face will affect my bacteria and affect my neurochemistry and affect my cells and my consciousness and my thoughts, and will feed back into my identity structure. So I think it's really, you can work it from both ends.
There's this group of psychiatrists in like the 60s and 70s, a couple of papers that came out that as there was this newfound excitement and interest in vegetable oils, there was concern that it was going to lead to a rise in homicide. Because there was concern that because those are kind of pro-inflammatory oils and there's some other kind of, loose data connecting them to aggressivity, that we were going to like change the fats of the human diet and as you're suggesting, begin to then change pieces of human consciousness or human experience. And I think what's interesting, and in certain ways everybody listening knows that I wouldn't say exactly think about it on a bell curve, but just certainly think about there being a wide spectrum that, take something like a vegan diet. People can eat a vegan diet, supplement it properly, and mostly report a lot of health benefits. People can eat a vegan diet, go into B12 deficiency, and end up with dementia, psychosis, and depression. And as you're saying, the kind of way that we view ourselves as kind of eaters or as bearers of our own personal truth, it's just been fascinating to me as a clinician to see so many people have good and bad outcomes on such a variety of both diets and treatments. It like humbles you in a certain way, right? It's humbled me certainly. You give Zoloft to two people with the same symptoms, and one of them you like totally change their life and heal them, and the other one you like sedate and take, give sexual side effects to. It's kind of, it leaves you really respecting the importance of people finding their individual journey back to full mental health and mental resilience. It's one of the things I hope in this new book to do a little bit, which is trying to like transcend this notion of, I don't know, I've just gotten a little fatigued with like vegan versus paleo versus impossible burger versus keto. It's just gotten, I don't find it very interesting or helpful or well-informed anymore when it comes to thinking about like nourishment.
We're shaped by media.
Yeah.
So all of those things that you just said they're all clickbait titles that are really effective. And, there's a Marshall McLuhan's book, Medium is the Massage, if you're familiar with that. Ever heard of that? Really great. Originally, the message was the medium is the message. And so the medium, and they changed it to the medium is massage. I think something like his editor thought it said massage, and they just kept it, and they thought it was cute. But the medium is the message. Essentially what that's suggesting is, you go to school and you go to work and you do all these things, and you think that while you're at school, you're learning what you're getting out of the specific information that's in the textbook. But ultimately what you're learning is within the container that you exist in. So you're learning about the way that your body, your biology, your mind, your emotional health, all that is learning What's the nature of the people in the room? How am I sitting? What's the environmental conditions? What's the lighting in the room? What's the patterning, the scheduling? All that is really doing the deeper shaping.
How can I stay awake during this boring lecture?
Yeah, right, sure. Yeah, those are like the tools that you're developing during that time frame. And then there's like, okay, and by the way, here's this information that you gathered. But the medium was really the thing that was actually creating the most traumatic change in your experience.
Well, I mean, I think the information, I think the problem, so many college students, and I think it's been so challenging for them during the pandemic of just so much of normal experience has been lost. But also this like pressure now, I think probably a mix of social media and also just a misunderstanding of childhood and adolescent development that people have of, this idea, like, I mean, a lot of young folks who they're really worried or looking for or focused on like their quote unquote, their passion.
Mm-hmm. That's very stressful.
Oh,
it can be stressful.
It's super stressful.
Yeah.
And super stressful. And I think it's not at all how people find success. I mean, I've gotten to work with a lot of successful people like you have and have found some success myself. And it's not, it wasn't like when I was like 23 or 24, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be a nutritional psychiatrist. It's like, that didn't even exist. Like, I'm going to get on social media, get some followers. Like, there was no social media.
Like most of the jobs that are coming up in the next few years.
Yeah,
they don't exist yet.
Yeah, and so I think it's certainly paying attention to what makes you feel good. But, a lot of the things that engage me are challenging, right? I wouldn't say it's exactly like a passion as much as it's one of these things you keep coming back to. You've got to get better at. You've got to understand in a deeper way. So,
passion's weird. I think some of the least healthy people that I know are people that are really claim health, and they really they do health. And I think I'm borrowing this from like Alan Watts or somebody. But when you are, in this example, health would be the thing. If you're doing health, then you're kind of missing the actual raw components that create health. Like health manifests naturally as a product of playing tennis outside, being with your friend community.
Right.
Just eating like, wow, great food, and we're all digging our hands. And you're like, oh man, like wow, like whoa, there, boom, health.
That's health, right?
That's health.
It is something that it's really great. That there does become a kind of quote-unquote healthy eating can become a kind of orthorexia, right?
Oh, yeah,
where
it gets weird.
And I think it's the same thing with fitness culture. It becomes, not just about how you look and how you feel, but that you look and feel fabulous kind of all the time, and you are a temple. And yeah, I mean, that's lovely in lots of ways, I guess, but it also, I think it doesn't place value on the pieces of human existence that are particularly sticky and interesting for us, the kind of underside of things, the darker side of things, our aggressive instincts, or the vulnerabilities that universally humans tend to feel when it comes to things like intimacy. Those are just a few, I guess, that come to mind of just, working on them doesn't feel healthy, because it forces us to sit with who we are and challenges that we have. And, it's one of those things that sometimes people don't really like about psychotherapy is that, you've been ignoring this thing, whatever it is, a piece of trauma or depression or an anxiety or just something that you're upset about, don't understand about yourself. And then suddenly you're really focused on it. And you're talking about it once a week or twice a week, really thinking about it in this really detailed, intense conversation about it. And sometimes people, symptomatically, they get worse. They feel worse initially just because, it's out there and there's the reckoning with that. But in a kind of focus, a culture that's focused just on health, you feel bad for a week or 2 weeks. Oh, I started this treatment or this supplement, whatever. I feel badly. You're going to stop. And it's where putting the value just on health, I think, misses that kind of concept of hormesis, of things that maybe don't exactly feel great or comfortable, push us to new things and new ways of thinking and new brain pathways that, I don't know, I think what it's all about.
When you were talking about the underlying aggressions and all the different kind of the deeper constituents of our personalities, it seems like a valuable asset to be able to navigate the human experience would be the ability to go in and out of holding this persona and then being able to drop the persona and say, okay, what is beyond this story of who I am? Mm-hmm. And then you put that back together with the new information that you've aggregated. You put it back into your persona, you put it on the mask, and you go into the world. But if we move through the world without a cohesive story of who we think we are, which ultimately is a story, at least for my story, it's a story. If we don't have enough anchored, rooted ties to that personality, we can just kind of spin out into the oblivion. We won't be very effective in society. But then the other side of that would be being excessively wrapped up in that story of your personality, and I am my job, and I am my car, and I'm my clothes, and this is it. This is all there is. And I think that could be quite limiting, and perhaps even like, I don't know. I was gonna say suffocating, but that's not true. I guess if you're living in your story and you die, and you enjoy the ride, who cares?
It's funny where something.
Or are you looking for like enlightenment or whatever?
Well, I think it depends. I mean, you can kind of play both those scenarios. You can think about somebody who's a lot of what you describe, someone who is gathering objects for the sake of impressing self and others,
right?
As opposed to somebody who is for whatever reason they were raised in poverty and it has incredible meaning and reward and excitement to them that they've finally bought a fancy car.
Sure.
But I think that word suffocating. I think that's what eventually leads people to doing personal work, whether that's in a therapy or a spiritual journey.
That's what The Mask was about, Jim Carrey.
Yeah,
it's the mask starts to take on the whole body. At first you put it on for a minute,
right.
But you got to be able to take the mask off.
Yeah, it's... What I'm really curious about is also just, I guess, both sitting here in the sauna as men, whether there's certainly been like a masculinity movement, I guess, for a good 20 or 30 years that how do I put this? I don't think that's really been about men waking up to misogyny and the patriarchy. I think that's about men maybe trying to feel safe for the first time a little bit with, I don't know, sharing and feelings, etc. But it does feel like now we're at this really interesting inflection point. And I'm seeing this in younger guys. There is more of, I think, both a personal accountability, but also a notion of care of the self, right? That there's something about the way that men generally have been really dependent on others, right? Mom, girlfriend, partner, however, right? To kind of direct them towards health. And I wonder if you think that's shifting, because, we're talking about like modern masculinity and what's it look like. I'm just sort of really curious on some of your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is I find some of the standardized New Age jargon to be a little bit like repulsive. Mm-hmm. Which is, that's a strong word. A step back from repulsive, but but
we're here in the sauna. It's okay.
It depends on the scenario.
Sometimes it's a little repulsive, right?
But only if there's a pretense or dishonesty of where we're at with the thing. I think oftentimes the same thing like spirituality is a very obvious one. Where perhaps we are leveraging this thing in order to get what we want because ultimately we're afraid. Or masculinity, the thing with that, it's like kind of my perception of it could come back to like the health idea, the ultimate expression of being masculine. You're probably not going to be like thinking I am masculine. That's not very masculine.
Right. You're just going to feel...
You just show up. You fucking show up.
Right.
And you be an anchor and you be supportive and you keep your word and you do the work, but the work is in your every moment. Like every moment is an opportunity to do the work, and so a person that's striving to be masculine, obviously inherently there's going to be some imbalance there, and they're seeking to rebalance it, and then upon the seeking of that rebalance, they'll probably create a platform and a social media thing and maybe develop a following, and the root of that still may come from a place of imbalance, but they're the primary kind of puppet of the movement. And there can be a lot of like legit masculine, feminine people that just happen to have social media platforms and have a voice and be using it in a really authentic way.
Yeah, no, both players certainly
exist.
Exist in this space. And also I think it's hard, because if you like you're not feeling comfortable in your masculinity or you want to be, what used to be like be a man, be more of a man, right? Which isn't exactly like that terminology or way we think about it, but if you are striving for something, like a better version of yourself, a better version of masculinity, there's something about that probably overlaps a little bit with the stance you're talking about, which is, which is kind of worshiping idol, or it's like idolatry of masculinity, as opposed to actually seeking progression and evolution and thinking about that in one's everyday life, which I do agree has a very different feel and look to it. And I think probably, considerate, thoughtful, circumspect, self-aware versus kind of striving and repulsive, as you put it. I think it's probably...
Just the bad player in quotation I find to be repulsive with all of the things. Right. Spirituality is the main one that I find repulsive. Masculinity, less, just more distasteful.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of, I think those are words it's like inflammation, right? It's just, or even depression or anxiety. They're just words. I mean, it's always been a little challenging, I guess, being a psychiatrist, but those feel a little bit like our words, like that's like I spend my professional time revolving around those words. I talk about those words every single day. And so when you see folks like, suggesting ridiculous things like, drink celery juice to treat your depression, right? It does get a little turfy.
Well, what about the people that works for, though?
Well, that's a really,
do you think that's a lot of placebo? Do you think that's a lot of specific to their genetics?
I think it's food-sibo.
Yeah.
For that one specifically, if you think...
Is there a difference between food-sibo and placebo, or do you just make food-sibo up?
I made food-sibo up a while ago. A while ago.
What are placebo? Like specific things.
Think about what happens when we follow rules. That when we join a group and we start doing things, behaviors that are within that are syntonic with that group, it makes us a member of that group. It makes us a better whatever, vegan, carnivore, paleo, keto. That is just reinforcing. It just feels good to us as people. So there's a boost that you get. If you've decided you're going to eat a certain way and you end the day and you've done it, you get a little boost in your mood and confidence, just like when you finish exercise or do anything hard. It's a little hard to, in research, cut that type of bias out or include it in the study fully appropriately.
Food seems practically impossible to research.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, if you think about...
you think of all of the variables.
Well, yeah. When you think about... that's where, when we separate out nutrition from lifestyle, when you're looking at the Mediterranean diet, and it's a little bit, for me, kind of like, look, there's a lot of difference between me and the Mediterraneans, right? They dance more than I do. They hug more than I do. They just do a lot of things. They fast more than I do. Yeah. So when we think about... how food relates to all this. Do you just keep people in the sauna until they dry out?
Yeah.
Or is this is like, because my competitive spirit's going to get going, and I'm just going to I'm going to be in here until my flight is like 8:30 and be like,
I think we did the sauna for 50 minutes.
This is the longest, we're just getting started. It's like round one. We haven't talked about the book yet. We were just like, we got like round one. Like, folks, hang in there. It's going to be amazing. I'm not really even sweating yet.
I loved it.
What does this mean about my mom?
I mean, we got the infrared going, so it's only at 1:15.
That's only 1:15.
So we keep it low, so it's manageable.
I'm so in such a strange place and space and time sometime now. It's like I raced all over today. I shot a TV segment in my hotel room where the producer's like, would you put the pillows down just a little bit? I'm like, oh, it's sort of obvious. I'm in my messy hotel room, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
that's great.
I got to surf. That was nice. That was really, and I got to eat sushi. That was really.
I want to take a quick moment and discuss the value of cultivating the microbiome. The trillions of little bugs, the jungle that exists inside of your abdomen and your intestines is responsible for more than just digesting food, although that's an immensely valuable component to it. The colonies of critters inside of your meat suit are also deeply tied to mood, cognitive function, production of neurochemistry, dopamine, serotonin, things of the sort, which is things that we discuss in this conversation with Dr. Droop. So to support the health of our guts, teamed up with our homies over at BioOptimizers. BioOptimizers is a company that I have trusted for many years. I utilize their supplements every day. One that I enjoy in relation to repairing leaky gut, repairing the linings of the intestines, rebalancing your microbiome, weeding out the bad bugs in quotations and reintegrating the good bugs. Leaky Gut Guardian has all of that in one little package. And if you're not totally satisfied with it, you don't feel benefits like real time within the week. You're like, wow, I feel better. Digestion's better. Energy levels are better. You feel more clear, any of that. If you don't feel completely 100% satisfied with the product, send it back, 100% money back guarantee. So you've got nothing to lose, and you get yourself a discount by going to leakygutguardian.com/align. That's leakygutguardian.com/align. You'll get yourself 10% off. And if you don't love the product, if it does not make your life better, then send it back, get that money back. And that's it. That's all. Thanks so much for tuning in on the program with my man, Dr. Drew. What do you think of consuming the bacteria in the Venice Breakwater Beach?
You know,
How you feel good about that?
I've been pretty interested my whole life in exposing myself to all kinds of strange things and bacterias, and so I'm okay with that. I mean, you wonder about it. Like I'm dreaming. You'd be a good guy. You're a super fit guy. I've been dreaming about this night mission on paddle boards around the island of Manhattan to raise money for suicide prevention, and I was thinking we could outfit the stand-up paddle boards with like cool Christmas lights and LED lights and get like
fun.
a group of folks to stand up paddleboard around.
There's sharks out there?
I mean, there probably are a little bit. And I know that when I'm in the midst of that journey in a flotilla of stand up paddleboards with you, I'm going to be thinking about the sharks. Whether they're there or not, in my mind, they're definitely like curious.
Well, so that's another thing. So this is clearly a highly tangential conversation, but coming back to something that's somewhat relevant to what's happened in the world. So we've gone through this time frame of being afraid of each other, distancing, masking, covering up facial expressions and gestures and such. That's one rock.
I think it's going to pass very quickly. It's like if you haven't had sex for a few years and then you have sex
Jump
again.
Back on the horse.
I mean, I just think it's like people love to socialize and people love being social. And I think people are, if anything, I think there's going to be this almost like, there's going to be a brief like, wow, I'm like a weirdo because like I don't exactly like remember this. And then there's going to be almost like a burst of hypomania. Right. Where people are just going to be like, of course I want to go dancing. I want to go dancing every night this week.
Crazy.
Yeah. And
I'm with that.
So
I like that. All right. Maybe we should do this more often. It's like a social fast.
Yeah. Wow.
Fasting's healthy.
You just like hide here in the sauna.
Well, fast regularly.
Just like, we'll
just hide out.
Yeah.
The other question I have in relation to that, though, is the hyper sanitization of everything. And you mentioned washing your hands a lot.
That's bad. Yeah, that's bad. I mean, it's good for viral pandemic, and it's good to like wash your hands after you go to the bathroom. But besides that, it's like soap and washing and all that stuff. It's super overrated.
Do you wash before you touch your dick or after?
It depends. I mean,
I think you gotta wash before.
Well, I mean, I think that your whole genitalia has a healthy biome. It has its own biome. Every area of your body has its own biome. So I think it's like...
I think it makes more sense if you're going to wash your hands in the bathroom, you wash your hands before you touch your junk.
You know, that's really...
That's an advanced technique.
I've not thought about that enough. But it is, you do take your dirty hands. It is one of those things that you think about all the signs and you think, gosh, people have been like taking their dirty hands and touching themselves all over the place, sticking their fingers in their nose, whatever, touching their junk for like a long time. And
it's all good. I think most guys touch their junk pretty regularly throughout the day.
They tend, I mean...
It's a common, I think it's like a soothing technique that most men probably
Oh, it definitely
wield.
is. I had a man who was, a kind of hyper-masturbator, and he asked me once, he's like, why is this not okay in terms of my, like, wellness and self-care? He's like, I just... I have a real high sex drive. I just like to squeeze one off like 3 times a day. It's like relaxing. It calms me down. And, I don't know.
It's not about the act itself. It's about, once again, it's what's behind it. Is it coming from a place of feeling disconnected and coming from a place of, is it addiction or is it something that genuinely is like a self-care practice? Is they're different?
Well, I think that's one of the problems a little bit being a psychiatrist is we're kind of in the business of dictating what's quote-unquote normal behavior and not. And we've certainly historically gotten into trouble for that, for a variety of things, like, I don't know, pathologizing homosexuality until the 70s. Like, you can rewrite that book, but at some point it's like, wow, that was real bad.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. And we did rewrite that book, so not we, but psychiatry, the psychiatry we.
Was that like written in textbooks?
Yeah, up until DSM. So we're on DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, which is kind of, it's just a research manual is the way to think about it.
We're all guilty in the DSM.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're doing research, you've got to decide, like, yes, you have OCD and you're in my study, or like, yeah, you got a lot of obsessions, but you don't actually have
and
OCD.
then how many, sorry for sidetracking you, but how regularly do we end up, this might not be the right term, but developing iatrogenic mental disorders as a product of the label? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's something.
Sorry, but you were on a thread. I jacked you up. I think I have a disorder.
You've got me super well. We can like we can definitely. That's gonna be like the next 50 minutes. We can just go. I work in 45-minute sessions, so it's just like basically I'm ready for the next session. You can just probably walk out of here, come back in, tell me your name's different, and I'll be like ready to start from the beginning. All right, so set up the questions here again because I don't have any liquid left in me.
The first one, we'll wrap this thing up soon because you're gonna die of heat exhaustion.
I don't think so. I don't think that's true. I think I could handle. I think I could handle this for a long time.
Oh, perfect. That's great. Then we'll keep it going. Well, you were on a thread that I was enjoying, and then I jumped you off of the thread of the potential of having a label. A person perpetuating that disorder
over this really lovely
young
young woman, and we had to get some extra time for a standardized test. And so part of that was getting her neuropsychological test from when she was like a 10 and 12 and 14-year-old young woman with really severe depression. And as I read through it, and it has all the like the symptoms and all the diagnostic stuff and all the questions about her character, and it really upset me. I got in this very, I felt very defensive that, this is this really wonderful, vibrant young woman who's working really hard on herself. And this write-up just makes her sound like a mess.
Sure.
And it's something I learned a long time ago from one of my patients and from a lot of my patients was just the importance of not just having therapy be a downer. And not that you want to gloss over anything, but the importance of celebrating people, the importance of modeling that, of really helping people create joyfulness in self, helping them connect with other people. I don't know. It's such a key part of it. And I think oftentimes, I don't know, in my career, I can sort of get stuck. It's like just focusing on symptoms, what's wrong with people.
Sure. If you weren't broken before you came in here, you'll be by the time we talk.
Right.
Trust me.
Like I've got it's a little bit, since it's going to go full circle what we were talking about earlier, it's where people are mad at a healthcare system, but the healthcare system is doing what it was designed to do.
Which is
what I'm designed to do is meet people when they're sick.
Right.
So the reason that this book, I hope, is very important in terms of changing the narrative about mental health is that mental health, there is no prevention effort other than awareness right now in America. It's a big deal that we simply are talking about the words depression. And I agree with that. I'm glad we're talking about it. But awareness doesn't do anything in terms of changing the narrative. All awareness can do is bring us to action. And that's where growing awareness about things like exercise and nutrition, growing awareness about where people can access mental health services, growing awareness around how treatment gets people a lot better, that we might have a broken healthcare system. But let me tell you, you give a skilled therapist in America a patient with depression or anxiety, they're going to probably get them better. There's a lot of really skilled and good mental health care going on, and we need that. And I guess I want to say that, especially right now, as we're really evolving our model to think about, wow, I see my patients through my phone now. Mm-hmm. And they talk to me anywhere. They can be on their vacation. I can be on vacation. I mean, it's really just shifted the flexibility we all have. That instead of patient of mine and you're in Brooklyn, you got to deal with 2 hours of the train to come see me for 45 minutes. In some ways, that's such a. However, that gets justified if we could do it differently. And more efficiently. And that's really what health telemedicine, teletherapy has provided us, and especially this increased dose. I mean, it's very, to do something and sort of change a system, it's very hard, right? To even a year ago, everyone would say, oh, well, teletherapy's not as good, and it's not this, it's not that. Even my own analyst, my psychoanalyst of 20 plus years, this lovely older man who at the beginning of the pandemic, he's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that FaceTime stuff. He just told me he's not actually going back to in-person. He's just going to keep doing the digital. And I said, how's it different? He said, it's definitely different. It makes me faster to call things out. And there's that way that because it adds this media component to therapy that's a little different, where you have to make effort at the connection. So like if a patient's needing to really hear something, I'll like lean in and fill my face into the screen, right? Or if I, sense that a patient is kind of getting a little too, I don't know, just feeling a little that I'm too in their space, I can just lean back.
Sure.
In a couple feet, and it changes the kind of experience of the patient. So
you could put the camera really low if they have some type of like giant fetish, giantism.
Right, exactly. It's like, ho, ho, ho.
I did a podcast with a girl that's she's a professional humiliatrix, and that was one of the things that I think she would do with people.
Did she sit right here with you?
Oh yeah.
And got super.
Sweet
and then
girl.
did she like humiliate you?
No, I didn't ask. No, maybe a little bit. I'm not into that.
Yeah,
I'm not against it. I'm just neutral.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I just like good old fashioned sex.
Well, yeah, that's like a fetish these days. It's like people without tattoos. It's like we're something now. It's like, ooh, you're new. It's like
I got no tattoos.
Like old-fashioned sex. Old-fashioned sex, I think, is underrated. I feel sorry. I meet a lot of young guys who are virgins, and not a lot, but a number of them I practice. And the pressure they're under to be porn stars. When you're like, and some of them are really surprised. And you're like, real sex isn't really like even really good sex doesn't really look like porn. They're like, no, get out.
I think I've had some porn sex.
Well, I mean,
not a lot, but I think there's been a couple times.
Well,
I don't have the equipment for it, but positionally speaking.
Well, yeah, it's it's funny. I because antidepressants have sexual side effects, I end up prescribing Viagra and Cialis, all those erection drugs. I remember one of my patients that came back. He's like, I understand how porn was made now. I was like, that stuff, it just works. It's like to the point where you're like, yeah, I'm not interested anymore. No matter what it's saying down there, I am not interested. But,
you just need some beet juice.
Yeah. The nitrates.
It's all about that nitrates. So, all right, the book. We have to talk about the book.
All right, let's talk about the book.
That's a part of the
thing. Book.
I didn't get to read the book yet because
you want to hear what it says?
You were over. You were over with my friend / friend of the podcast, Max Lugavere. You guys were recording. And I realized that, like, OMG, I have 2 copies of your book. Yeah. We should do this right now while you're in town for another 6 hours.
This is...
Typically, I would have loved to have read the book. I would have had, like, a whole thing of preparation.
Right. We're going to give you get the author right here in your sauna. So it's like, I don't know. It's like, why not just get the personal version? So this is my 4th book, and I'm one of the early people in the nutritional psychiatry space. I just had that real simple question, like when people ask me what to eat, as a psychiatrist, somebody interested in mental health and brain health, like, what should I tell them? Besides what medicine was telling them, which is like, don't eat cholesterol, don't eat saturated fat. And I found people were mainly translating that into, I don't eat meat, or I feel guilty about it when I do. I eat a lot of junk, but no one's really told me it's junk. I avoid cholesterol, but I don't really know what that molecule does, or really even what foods to find it in besides meat. They're in a kind of anti-meat stance and not a real, what I call eater stance. They're not thinking about what they like to eat and the ways to nourish themselves with those foods. So Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety tries to first help people really upgrade their knowledge about mental health and food, but in particularly about these conditions, depression and anxiety, and to incorporate the new evidence and new ways of thinking. A lot of people are still thinking about these conditions, or depression particularly, just as related to serotonin, and that's really a mistake. One, it's just like super old. It's like, I don't know. It's like, I like songs from the 90s too, but like there's been a lot of good, Lizzo.
Serotonin's like the Iliopsoas of neurochemistry.
Exactly.
That's serotonin.
We've moved on.
And so pick up the phone, you got the dopamine spike.
Yeah, I mean, there's other neurotransmitters in there.
That's right, just the dopamine.
But I think the big concept people need to learn about neuroplasticity, that your brain can grow and change in adult life. We want people to understand more about inflammation and how that affects and decreases mood and increases anxiety. And then this idea that we've been talking about bacteria and the microbiome, how can you eat in a way that promotes a healthier, more diverse microbiome? And so my work over the last decade is really, how do we identify foods that have really high nutrient density in essential and important brain nutrients? Minerals and vitamins are important for the brain. Things like omega-3 fats, vitamin B12, magnesium, zinc, they're particularly important to the brain, and they're also tied directly to brain growth. So I build meals and recipes and food recommendations from thinking about the food groups that have the most of these nutrients. So it's not so much I want you to just eat kale all day long, but I think you should be interested in leafy greens because leafy greens are really nutrient dense. I think you should be interested in seafood because that's where you're going to find it's really only concentrated source of long-chain omega-3 fats. And so that's really how the book works, with the idea of trying to share some of the science, and then the science of nutritional psychiatry, which is just sort of cool, which is that
it's a great term.
Correlationally,
it's like sexy.
Yeah, thanks.
Nutritional psychiatry.
I mean, it's we didn't have that for a long time. People asked what we did, and I'm like, I'm a food shrink. I don't know. And then they started calling us nutritional psychiatrists.
What is the origin of shrink? Is it shrinking minds?
I don't really know. I don't really know. I hope it's.
How do you not know the origin of shrink? I'm like a little bit irritated.
Well, I mean, it's like I don't really. I mean, it could be it's just one of those things. Like shrink. I think it's like head shrinker. I think that's where it comes. But I don't know.
We're gonna have to look up the origin of shrink here.
It's in. I bet my Columbia's chairman Jeff Lieberman wrote a book called Shrinks, and so maybe it's in his book.
All right. Well, I'll do the old Google afterwards.
Yeah, Dr. Google will help you with that one. Anyway, you were asking about shrinks?
No, I don't know. Sorry, it's late.
The sun is getting to you. What time? I mean, it's like we're about to head over to Max's, right? I'm just getting like Max has got a sauna. This is just round one. We're gonna hit round two.
Max does have a sauna as well. This is, all right. So something that I am interested in, then we will wrap this bitch up, is the level of potential mind control that is happening inside of our gut. We didn't talk about toxoplasmosis. That's another example.
That's what I was thinking about with schizophrenia risk, toxoplasmosis. There's a
so
theory that
higher likelihood of getting in motorcycle accidents and doing dangerous things and such. And you can explain what it is. I've already talked about it probably ad nauseum on here, but the whole field of, I think the term I said it earlier, neuroparasitology, I think is a fancy term for it.
Yep.
So the study of organisms getting hacked, the nervous system being hacked by other organisms to do their deeds. I wonder to what level that may or may not be happening in our own guts, and like how much control do these bugs that exist within us have, and can you even say these bugs, because ultimately the bugs just are you?
I think the bugs have a profound influence on appetite, energy metabolism, sugar cravings, brain fog, mood cycling, probably. I think the bugs probably are involved in cognition in ways that we're going to understand. And then I think it remains a question because it's still, we talked about the microbiome, we talk about the bacteria, but there's like viruses and parasites and all kinds of stuff living down there. And so, and like anything, we talk about mental health and things like meds and this idea about bacteria, like it applies to all of us, as opposed to there are some people who are going to be, for whatever genetic reasons, have particular vulnerabilities to, for example, having certain parasites or strands of bacteria in your body, and some people aren't. And so it's one of the things that makes research really confusing. And I think also beyond the research, what's really confusing for patients, right? This idea of like, do you know this med's going to work? Like, no, I don't. Like, do you know this psychotherapy is going to work? It's like, well, maybe there are, some research studies on how we could predict this with EEG or fMRI, but like nobody pays for that before treatment. Like the way you figure that out is you go into treatment. So I think that's going to be the next wave of kind of mental health, where our diagnostic procedures and our treatments are going to start to shift and change to incorporate things like the microbiome, inflammation, new genetic and epigenetic data. We're certainly not there yet, but I think we're going to be there in what is it? I'm gonna give us 10 years. I was a little more optimistic when all the genetic information started coming out. When I first started running genetic tests on my patients, I was like, this is cool. Like, I'm a doctor of the future now. But then you realize that it's not clinically useful yet, and it's just a very, very expensive test that sometimes it's just really hard to, it's funny when you're in clinical practice, all this stuff that, you read about it on the internet or people have opinions on, you end up like sitting with a patient and results and then doing your best to like make it useful. And you only have to sit in that situation like so many times to be like, okay, this is, an interesting way to spend time together thinking theoretically, but it's not actually clinically applicable right now. That's as right now. That's going to shift.
So what do you think where my mind sits with the nutritional conversation is I'm really excited about the source of food. I'm less excited about the specific, whether it's an apple or a fish or a beef liver or,
like the knowing where it's from, how
what's
it
its
how it
origins.
got there,
what's its impact on the environment, what's its impact on the soil that it came from or didn't come from, what's its like that, what was his relationship to its farmer, like that. To me, I'm like, intuitively, I'm 100% I can get behind that. Like that feels very clean, connected. I'm like, I think that matters. But then the other information of the specifics and the dogmas and the camps and the religions around nutrition, I think that a lot of that, ultimately what people are seeking is community and tribe. They're trying to, seek togetherness, which is like another nutrient. And there's a lot of, I think, static and minutia and noise around people stating facts based off of research that's not backed by anything it would be very hard to have like really rock solid empirical evidence on the exact mechanisms of what happens when a banana goes, you eat a banana and then someone in Ethiopia eats a banana and someone in California eats a banana, and then their whole entire history and environmental conditions and what they ate the day before and the day after and the weather and
you're not going to prove
altitude
anything about bananas that way. And it's I think you're very spot on about the way that little bits of science get used in the media to ultimately misrepresent what's actionable, or at least that's what happens. And I think, if we're honest, there aren't a lot of folks, and I put myself really on the borderline of this. I mean, I've got a medical degree. I understand research reasonably well, but even with that understanding, the ability to really understand the statistics of a new complex meta-analysis, there just aren't a lot of people with those math skills. It's kind of, as you get into some of these debates, like, I don't know, that, are in the wellness world about, GMOs or plant-based diets or endocrine disruptors, the number of, I don't know, I don't want to say I defer to people with really deep knowledge, but for some of those issues I really do, because I don't think most people understand those issues in a really deep and nuanced way. I've certainly found myself, as I confront my own biases as a psychiatrist, both about mental health, but then about nutrition and about research. I don't know. I've just learned a tremendous amount in terms of, how subtle and pernicious all of our biases are. So
is there a nutritional dogma that would lead to the least amount of depression and anxiety? So, like, did you create a dogma in the?
I think so. I mean,
depression?
I think the dogma.
Another dogma. Here we go.
Here we go. I did. I created a dogma, and it's the worst type. It's the one that says it's better than all the others, and it says, aside from what popular culture is going to have you believe, that your pecs and biceps and butt and breasts and these are the parts of you that matter, and it's how you should run your food plan to be like thin and trim and ripped and all that. The really thing that you need to value is your mind and your neurons. Like, not a lot of them. Like, you got like 100 billion of those cells, and I guess that's dogma. I want people to stop prioritizing all this other stuff and start prioritizing human brains, because I think human brains, when well nourished, and nourished beyond just the nutrients. I mean, sure, I spent a lot of time on nutrients. We focus on 12 nutrients in the book. I back that up with as much research as I possibly can. But there's also a piece of the book that isn't about nutrition. It's about what you're talking about, which is how you are connected to the food, how you purchase and participate in the food cycle, how you think about and identify as an eater, really trying to tap into some of your own personal cultural roots. And I think those are all really big pieces that get really lost in the nutrition debates.
The one thing that you said that I kind of slightly went off track with was the reducing your neurological synaptic function to being isolated away from the musculoskeletal system.
Mm-hmm.
So in doing exercise, fitness Taibo, whatever you're into, getting outside for some Shinrin Yokus.
I haven't heard about Taibo in so long.
Dude, Taibo's sick.
Are you the last remaining person doing Taibo?
No, I have never actually done Taibo, I don't think. I don't think I've actually fully, but I like the idea of it.
Tonight,
it's nice
actually,
to say.
I got the invite. It's Max Luber's Taibo party.
Taibo party, exactly.
Taibo
in the sauna. It's just be 12 of us doing Taibo in the sauna. But when you're doing your Taibo, you're turning the gears in the brain. You're producing the BD and F, and
for sure.
So all those systems.
Totally artificial separation.
My
this
lens.
Mind-body, this body-brain separation, mind-body separation. I really think it's such a misstep by Descartes. I don't think it helps us to think about it as separate. I think that when we really think about it as an integrated, complex, because separating the brain from biology or separating the body from its involvement in our mental health it doesn't make any intuitive sense.
And it affects the way that we live our lives and our perception of self and the way that we navigate. And that's the same thing, like the medium is the message. Like the way that your thoughts or my thoughts, our thoughts, they're literally, shaping the way that we navigate our lives. And so if we grow up with an idea that it is a separate thing, it's an interesting thing how that would affect a person's life. I don't know. Shit's crazy.
How do you sum up these podcasts, man? You get people in there, you get them like super like sauna trippy. Like I have no idea what we've talked about. I'm glad we talked about the book there at the end. But then it's like up to you to like sum it up. It's like
I don't sum it up.
It reminds me of a session. So everybody listening, I hope you've had a nice time. If you'd fit here in the sauna, it would be great to have you here. And I hope whatever we've talked about is helpful to you in your mental health and in your quest for better mental health. That's really the intent of this work. Certainly, I'm interested in the food you eat as having a piece of that. But I guess as I like to remind everybody, if you never eat any brain food, there's still lots you can do to take good care of your mental health, and it should be a priority for everybody.
You should host this podcast. You'd do a way better job than I do.
It's all right. I'm just like, I'm feeling this. So in between, I'll host this episode, then we'll go record another episode, Taibo episode.
We'll do Taibo.
Yeah, I'll lead the
Taibo.
Special.
I'll lead the Taibo.
Taibo edition.
Yeah.
It'd be great. You should do a podcast on each failed fitness trend, but that actually people loved for a little while, and they're not sure where it went.
Dude, that's legit. You could say the same thing about each nutritional trend, which is why I'm off the boat on everything. I'm just like, if I see a new thing coming in, ketosis, whatever, I'm like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
I get it.
It's hard.
This will be around for a bit. I get it. Cool. Sweet guys, enjoy.
Right. It seems. It does seem.
Give it 2 more years. We'll be on to the next thing. Everybody needs to be eating niacin all day or something. Whatever the thing is, we'll figure out something else.
I find it also fascinating when you end up in a situation where you're getting, when you give talks and you get the same, this. Remember that era where every talk you get a question like coconut oil. You get the coconut oil question, the GMO question.
Well, that was an era for you. Mine was more building healthy, supple butt cheeks and hip hinges and spinal health.
Yeah.
I didn't get a lot of coconut oil questions.
No, they wanted coconut oil. When you ask, how do you get a healthy hip hinge, it's pretty much coconut oil is going to be in there. You just, put it in there, rub it on there, eat it. It goes right to the hip hinge, pretty much. There's a study I actually saw, and it's like 67% improvement in hip hinge flexibility for coconut oil consumers.
Olive oil as well. That's a big part of the cultures in Eastern Mediterranean cultures, Northern African cultures, places where there's a lot of olive oil. One, I have this in my book. They're spending a lot of time on the ground, which is a major part of lubricating the joints and keeping everything mobile, keeping all the synovial fluids in the right places and such. But another big part of that was their consumption of olive oil. I think it was oleocanthal or something. It's a specific compound in there that's very helpful for joint health. There's a lot of variables with that shit. But yeah, olive oil is a big deal. And then you have some people saying, don't eat olive oil. Then you have some, I'm just like, dude, fucking just look at the source.
I have 12 books. I have olive oil is one of those power players for mental health in this new book because...
That's my belief.
Yeah, I just think it should be the main fat that you eat. And agree.
Why is that?
I think it should be the main fat that you eat for a couple of reasons. One, being a monounsaturated fat, it's not particularly oxidizable compared to something like a long-chain omega-3 fat. There's some long-term data looking at olive oil consumption and reduced risk of depression, but I like it because, one, it's a fat that everyone tends to agree on. Two, it's tied to reasonable health benefits in the data, although, all nutritional epidemiological correlational studies kind of can be called into question. I like the biochemistry of the plant molecules in there, the phytonutrients in there. They tend to be quite anti-inflammatory. And then I like the idea that using it to cook my vegetables, I'm pulling out certain fat-soluble things like beta-carotene and other carotenoids, other fat-soluble nutrients that you just do a better job absorbing if you eat fats. So,
Eat more olive oil. Is there any top 5 things that are causing people depression from a
nutritional standpoint, I think for
Cause
sure.
is probably a loaded word, but
I think you can. Well, it's a good point, right? So the association with depression, you get increased associations with the Western style dietary pattern, increased association or increased odds of depression with a high omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, so eating a lot of omega-6 fats and not a lot of omega-3 fats.
Which even the omega-3, omega-6 argument can be kind of, I think, confusing because I think the belief that it's like, okay, anything with omega-6 is just bad.
Right. Well, it sort of skips the fact that omega-6 fats are essential fats that everybody eats and everybody needs to eat. It's the eicosanoid system's a complex and fascinating system.
Which, again, ties back to our kind of clickbait mind that's formed by media.
Is this evil? Get rid of it. Yep. So it's like midnight my time.
All right. Let's wrap this bitch up.
Hold on. You're getting to some food questions. That was a good one. Everybody listening, it's like midnight. I'm in a sauna. It's been a lovely and long day.
It's a cool way to wrap it up, though, right?
It's a good way to wrap it up.
Sweating out the demons.
Yeah. You know what? With a lot, I think the sweat just evaporates, right, and then it kind of leaks out. I probably lost all of.
You probably just got good skin biome. All the bugs are soaking that shit up.
They're soaking it, and they're eating my toxins.
Yeah, it's heyday.
Well, this has been a pleasure. I hope people will, if you're still listening, check out the book. It's Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety.
Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety.
It's filled with really, really you have illustrations. Have you seen the illustrations yet? Those are really nice.
And you're a medical doctor.
I'm a medical doctor.
You're one of the only doctors that's, most of the doctors, not that medical doctors better or worse than the other, but I feel like a lot of the doctors are typically like chiropractors and stuff like that.
Look at this pesto recipes. See, so the book's full of these sketches and drawings.
Oh, this is cool.
To sort of
what a cool thing.
What a
great tool to be able to give this to patients and clients and friends and family and such.
I think it's a nice way to. I like it because food's always been really useful for me clinically in terms of a good way to get a conversation started. Like if you're talk to people about how they're feeling. I think all of us can, especially when somebody's sort of struggling. It's even for a professional like me, sometimes it's kind of hard, especially outside of the office. How do you get that conversation going? And it's where talking about food very quickly leads to talking about how we're doing, how we're feeling about our food, and bam, suddenly you're having a conversation about mental health. So I hope it just helps people get more talk going in their homes about depression and anxiety, and I hope it gets people eating more of these nutrient-dense foods that the science really seems to clearly and consistently tell us over the last 10 years really can make a difference in terms of emotional health.
Love it. Thanks so much for making time to do this. Thanks for coming over and sweating it out, doing some podcast Taibo with me for an hour and a half.
It's my pleasure. I've never been in an infrared sauna, so it's like
today's the day, man. Today's the day. All right, thank you all for tuning in. Over and out. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. If you did, share it out on the gram. It would be a great place. You could tag myself at Align Podcast, or you tag Drew Ramsey at Dr. Drew Ramsey. And once again, thank you so much for reviews. Thanks for sharing it. Thanks for telling your friends. The way that this program grows is ultimately through you guys. So I so greatly appreciate y'all's support if you find this podcast valuable. And lastly, if you all experience back pain or knee impingement, we created some mini programs that can be found at alignpodcast.com/courses, 2 of which on there are specifically geared towards knee impingement. If you're having any kind of knee pain, clunkiness, crepitus, it just feels like there's something off in there. We've got some great exercises in the knee course, and then also back pain. It's particularly low back. So we broke down, I think it's about 12 different videos that I find to be some of the most impactful, effective exercises, self-care techniques for you to alleviate, strengthen, prehab, rehab that spine of yours. So jump over to alignpodcast.com/courses if you're interested in that. And that's it. Thanks for tuning in. I will see you